Welcome to Build and Chilled, a series where I build playable Sims homes while also discussing chilling stories, from true crime to paranormal to aliens. Joining me today is MactimusPrime.
Hi.
And Mactimus, are you ready to hear what story I got for you today?
You bet your sweet bippy I am. What story do you have for me today?
All right, so I'm going to tell you the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. All right, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born in July 27th of 1995 to Rod and Claudine, or Dee Dee Blanchard, in Chack Bay, Louisiana. She actually got her name from Dee Dee's love of the name Gypsy and Rod's love for the band Guns N' Roses. Who didn't love Guns N'
Okay.
Roses in the
I
90s,
mean, I mean
honestly?
facts.
Shortly after the birth of little Gypsy, however, Ron ended up telling Dee Dee that he wanted to separate as he believed that their marriage was for the wrong reasonings. Valid. Dee Dee tried really hard to get Ron back to their family so they could have like their cute little family together. But when he profusely refused, Dee Dee ended up taking Gypsy and went to go live with her family. At just 3 years old, Dee Dee discovered that Gypsy possibly had sleep apnea, and she had begun taking the toddler to and from hospitals for many overnight visits, lots of testing. Gypsy began to grow up, and she was told that she had a wide variety of health issues due to an unspecified chromosomal disorder. One TikToker later on actually discovered that this may have been a microdeletion chromosomal disorder. Between ages 3 and 5, Gypsy was also told to use a walker as her mother had noticed that she was having muscle issues.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's like a lot for a kid already.
Yeah, exactly. Like, my God.
At around 7 years old, Dee Dee recommended Gypsy start using a wheelchair because the muscle issues had just gotten that bad. As well as some point in time, it's kind of really hard to like place exactly where, but at some point in time, while she was still a small child, she was also brought to the hospital to get a feeding tube placed on her or in her. Not really sure how that works. As Dee Dee did notice, though, that Gypsy was having a hard time eating anything. So this kid is like, let's say, between 3 and 7, is in a wheelchair, has a feeding tube, like can't walk on her own.
Pretty much has gone through
She
everything under the sun and then some.
Oh, and that's not even the end of it. That's the worst part.
There's more?
Oh, of course, there's more. Due to medical issues with Gypsy, Dee Dee had to take Gypsy out of public school. Again, this is one of the things that it's not like super well said when it was, but it was somewhere between kindergarten and second grade. Her mother actually took on the role of just not just being a caretaker, but also now deciding to be a teacher and started homeschooling Gypsy on like how to read, write, things like that. Dee Dee often took Gypsy to Special Olympics events, which is kind of cool. Gypsy was even named the honorary queen of the crew of Mid City, which is apparently a child oriented parade held during Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
Huh.
At the events, Gypsy would tell everyone about how much she loved animals, how she had 4 cats, and how her grandfather was apparently her best friend.
Aw.
It's adorable. Not long after that, Dee Dee and Gypsy moved in with the grandfather, whose name is Claude, and his new wife, Laura. While there, Dee Dee ended up getting herself arrested for several minor offenses, including writing bad checks. It was never anything like major, though. After she was released from jail a few times, Claude and Laura were actually questioning like how fit Dee Dee was to be a mother to Gypsy. And after all of like the interrogations about this and the constant berating, Dee Dee actually took Gypsy and left. From here, though, they moved from Chack Bay, Louisiana to New Orleans. They lived in public housing, and the duo survived from off of child support payments from Rod, as well as public assistance based on Gypsy's medical conditions. Dee Dee took this new move as the opportunity to start having Gypsy seen by various specialists, mostly at the Tulane Medical Center as well as the Children's Hospital of New Orleans. Here is where Gypsy finally started to get the medical treatment that she desperately needed, including seizures that Gypsy would suffer like every few months. And to counter these seizures, they actually gave Dee Dee anti seizure medication to hopefully stop that entirely. At this point, though, Hurricane Katrina devastated Louisiana. Specifically, of course, as we know, the New Orleans like area
Right.
completely destroyed the area in August of 2005. Dee Dee and Gypsy, they left their destroyed home for a shelter in Covington, Louisiana, which was specialized for people of special needs. They lived there for about 3 months, and it was at this specialized shelter that Dee Dee realized she wasn't able to save any of Gypsy's important paperwork, like her birth certificate or even Gypsy's medical records. So all of that was gone. A doctor at the shelter who was from Ozarks actually suggested to the pair that they move to Missouri, which is where Ozarks is. The next month, they were actually airlifted to Missouri as a part of the resettlement of people that were unhoused by Katrina. At first, Dee Dee and Gypsy rented a home in Aurora, Missouri. There, Gypsy became the 2007 Child of the Year and was given that title by the Ole Foundation, which was a foundation that actually advocated for the rights of individuals with feeding tubes. So that's kind of cute.
Yeah, that's actually interesting.
So, this whole story, though, of a single mother with a very disabled child forced to flee from the disaster of Katrina, this captured a lot of media attention. In 2008, they actually moved to Springfield, Missouri, where Habitat for Humanity had built a house for them. This house was meant to be perfect for them as it had a wheelchair ramp out the front and it even had a hot tub to help out. It was said to help out with Gypsy and her muscle issues.
Makes sense.
The local community actually would often pitch in to help Dee Dee, and Dee Dee would often host movie screenings at their house to help raise money for any treatments or medications that she needed for Gypsy. This story of theirs, it boomed. So many charities would offer them services. Like they stayed in Ronald McDonald houses during medical appointments. In Missouri, they got free flights to see doctors at a children's hospital in Kansas City. They got free trips to Disney World, backstage passes to a Miranda Lambert concert, all while Rod is still making his monthly child support payments of about $1,200 a month. Rod would also occasionally call into Gypsy, like on birthdays and such. However, it was reported from neighbors that Dee Dee would say that Rod was actually a drug addict and was like highly abusive. So that's kind of weird, but eh. But everyone who met Gypsy loved her. She was small. She was only about 5 feet tall. Her voice was very high pitched and very like childlike. She had a nearly toothless mouth, large glasses, and a shaved head from the chemotherapy that she was receiving due to her having leukemia. She also had a very deep love for Disney princesses, more specifically Cinderella and Harry Potter. She was a big fantasy nerd. Dee Dee and Gypsy would do live interviews, and in these live interviews, you could truly see how happy the two were and how grateful they were for everything the community and charities were doing for them. In 2011, Gypsy was actually taken to a sci-fi convention with her mother where she met a man named Dan. This guy, Dan, Gypsy had actually been speaking to online for a little bit of time. Gypsy was swooned by this guy, like most 16-year-olds would. She followed the man naively to his hotel room, where luckily Dee Dee quickly found them and took Gypsy home. Around this time, though, Dee Dee had realized Gypsy might not be mentally competent to be independent. In 2012, Dee Dee and Gypsy were stopped by police after being accused of shoplifting from a Hobby Lobby about $20 worth of craft supplies that they hid underneath Gypsy's chair, like so underneath her wheelchair. They claimed that originally they came in there looking for scrapbooking things, which explains all the items, and they honestly just forgot to put these items back. Around this same time, Gypsy would often use the family laptop without Dee Dee's knowledge. She would often talk to men online whilst her mother was asleep.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. It was during these times that she actually met Nicholas Godejohn from Big Bend, Wisconsin. She met him on a Christian singles website, and the two were speaking/dating for about 2 years when they began discussing in 2014 the idea of eloping. discussing how they were just meant to be together.
Oh, God. Here we go.
Oh, yeah. In 2015, Gypsy arranged and paid for Nick to meet her and her mother in Springfield. It was supposed to be like a little, oops, didn't mean to bump into you. Well, now that I'm here type deal. And this was supposed to be happening at the showing for the 2015 version of Cinderella. Gypsy thought that this was perfect, so she actually decided to dress up as Cinderella and told Nicholas Godejohn to dress up as Prince Charming. During the showing of the movie, Gypsy ended up wheeling herself to the restroom mid-movie. She actually asked her mother Dee Dee to update her on like what she missed when she got back. After a few minutes, Nick ended up following Gypsy, and the two got real intimate in the handicapped bathroom at the theater. They ended up returning to the theater, like the showing room, and watched the rest of the movie as normal. While this was going on, though, Dee Dee kind of thought that Nicholas was just a creep the entire time. She really did not like the fact that this guy kept trying to get close to Gypsy. Yeah. So while after this, the two really didn't see each other a lot in person, as Dee Dee found Nick more creepy than anything. But they did still speak online quite a bit. They decided eloping was the best option. Gypsy stole some money, mailed it to Nick so he could go back to Springfield in June of 2015. Dee Dee and Gypsy were actually at an ER at the time to have her feeding tube replaced when he had arrived in Springfield. Once the pair did get home, Gypsy waited until Dee Dee fell asleep. Then she stole over $4,400 in cash that Dee Dee had.
Jesus Christ.
And first off, who the hell just got $4,400?
That was my follow-up statement right there, was who the fuck has that lying around?
It is 2015. Banks exist. Like, why do we just have $4,400 just in cash in our house? That's wild.
That is fucking wild.
But yeah, so they used this to then stay at motels in Springfield until they mailed some stuff to Nick's home in Wisconsin, and then soon after took a bus to Wisconsin to Nick's home. Not long after, though, they got to Nick's house in Wisconsin in Big Bend. Police agencies in Waukesha County raided Nick's home. The two were taken to the station. When police arrived, they were actually shocked to see that Gypsy was not in a wheelchair and that she was wearing a wig. When they get to the police station, though, this is where Gypsy hears the worst news of her life. Dee Dee was no longer alive. Gypsy bursts into tears upon hearing the news. She tells officers how much she loved her mother and repeats it over and over and over again. Gypsy asked if her mother had actually committed self-unaliving because she left. Police informed her that it was actually a suspected homicide. To which Gypsy starts to blame herself and say that she should have never left home and it's all her fault. The police were caring towards Gypsy and her grief. After a bit of Gypsy pacing around the room and walking perfectly fine, she tells police her story. Gypsy tells police that Nick told her the only way that they could actually be together was if Dee Dee wasn't around anymore. Nick allegedly told her that if she truly wanted to be with him, the only way was to unalive her mother. So when he took a bus to Springfield, Gypsy had stolen a knife from Walmart and hid it for him. Once Dee Dee fell asleep, Nick put on latex gloves, came into the house, locked Gypsy in the bathroom, and proceeded to harm Dee Dee with the knife.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah. Gypsy tells police she could hear Dee Dee screaming out for her until everything went eerily quiet. At which point, Gypsy claims Nick let her out of the bathroom, forced her into her bedroom, where he raped her. So it just apparently gets worse. She then says that she only went with Nick to his house out of fear of what he might do to her. The police repeatedly asked her if she had anything to do with her mother's unaliving, and she repeatedly states, "No, sir." Then, police, of course, moved the questioning onto Nicholas Godejohn, telling him, as soon as they walk into the room, that Gypsy told them everything, which is like pretty typical interrogation
Yeah.
tactic. But they also tell Nick that if he truly loves Gypsy, he'll just be honest with the police. So immediately after Nick admits to everything, he admits to harming Dee Dee 4 times, which this stuck out to police because Dee Dee had been stabbed 17 times, as well as nearly decapitated. And Nick adamantly, still to this day, only admits to stabbing her 4 times. He claims that this was Gypsy's idea. He just simply wanted to elope, but she reinforced that Dee Dee would find a way to take her back. He explains how he has autism and believes he has a multiple personality disorder due to hearing voices, and claims that it wasn't actually him that unalived Dee Dee, but his darker side named Victor.
The
That's a thing.
No, and I understand that's a thing. But just when I think this story can't take a hard right turn, it finds a way to take a hard right turn.
Yeah, so he says that like he was on medications for a while, and these medications were to stop him from hearing voices. Yeah, so Nick tells police that him and Gypsy had actually planned the whole thing out. After the unaliving, he tells police that it was Gypsy's idea to have intercourse, as she said she liked Victor, and she liked his darker side. He said that while he himself didn't want anything bad to happen, Victor, on the other hand, would scream in his head, "That bitch is unalived." Police are intrigued when they hear this, as there was a Facebook post on Dee Dee and Gypsy's shared Facebook account with those exact words. And you can actually still look up this page and still see that Facebook post. There was a comment under that one, though, that said, "I effing slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so effing loud." All in caps, by the way. That whole
that was all.
was all in caps.
You could tell that was all in caps, and I'm not even seeing it.
This post is one that when it was made, people actually started to call 911 and was like asking them to make a welfare check on Gypsy and Dee Dee Blanchard. And that's actually how they found Dee Dee's corpse. Because police showed up to do a wellness check, they found Dee Dee, and all they saw at the house was the wheelchair. It's also important to note that these Facebook posts, Gypsy claims to have been the one who made those posts, and she says that she made them because she wanted the police to find Dee Dee's corpse. So they actually had assumed that Dee Dee was unalived and Gypsy was kidnapped. So it was a surprise to them to see Gypsy walking, not in a wheelchair, and also they're seemingly on her own free will. So they actually, like I said, they traced the IP address of these posts, and that's how they found Nick's home. Nick also took this moment to tell the police something they have already started to suspect, which is that Gypsy wasn't sick at all. Gypsy and Nick proceeded to tell police about how Gypsy was a fully functioning adult and that Dee Dee was lying the entire time about all of those supposed medical issues to garner handouts. They explained how Dee Dee would go so far as to falsify medical documents just to get Gypsy unneeded medical surgeries like the feeding tube, the anti-seizure meds. The anti-seizure meds actually caused all of her teeth to rot away in her mouth. Like that was just like an adverse effect they had.
Right.
So she literally has no teeth and she got left needing dentures. Luckily though, the only medical treatment that she did not need, that she did not get, is chemotherapy, because that probably actually would have put her through a hell of a lot more.
Right. But
she got damn near everything else.
But like to falsify medical documents.
Yeah, like that's crazy. So with this, psychiatrists during the court case, they actually suspected Dee Dee Blanchard to have Munchausen's by proxy, which is essentially like you just believe that your kids are so sick and all this that you have to take care of them. That you'll go so far as to forcing your kids to be sick, whether it be like feeding them poisons or things like that, to force them to be sick to make your story true. and it's like a really bad mental illness. There's actually a story on TikTok. A girl has been speaking out about it pretty recently too, where her mother went so far with her Munchausen's by proxy that she ended up getting her daughter's limb amputated that it didn't need to be amputated. And like I'm not even bullshitting that. Like there's actually a girl on TikTok.
Believe that,
I
but
think
like,
she's,
Jesus fucking
Yeah.
Christ.
She shares her whole story and it's awful. Like it's terrible that like there's actually parents out here poisoning their kids because like they want their kids to be sick so bad and get the attention from it or what have you.
Right, but still.
It was here that it was revealed that Gypsy was not in fact born in 1995, but was actually born July 27th, 1991. And that Dee Dee had falsified her birth certificate to make her younger than what she really was.
I mean, if you're already forging medical documents, I mean,
why stop there, right? Like,
why not just go
fortify everything? She was doing false checks. I mean, that honestly probably should have been.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that should have been the first sign, but you know,
forging checks. Hey, let's upgrade to forging medical documents. And I mean, hey, if you can forge that, forge the birth certificate. Go big or go home. I guess. So Gypsy claims that after years of physical abuse, as well as this like medical abuse, that all she wanted to do was get away from her, and she saw Nick as her only way out.
As the escape.
Yeah, he was essentially the means to an end. Thus, though, after this, the two were sent away to county jail until July of 2016, where Gypsy took a plea deal of second-degree unaliving, where she would have to serve 10 years. She was offered this plea deal after the knowledge of Dee Dee's child abuse towards Gypsy came out. Nick Godejohn, however, was not so lucky. Prosecutors stated that he initiated the plot. He was given a lot less sympathy than Gypsy. In 2019, his trial was postponed as a psychiatric exam was requested. This was done due to the fact of Nick's lawyers claiming his autism, saying he had an IQ of 82, and suggested he had diminished capacity. In November of 2018, Nick's trial officially began.
Mm-hmm.
In the opening statements, lawyers argued that this was planned out entirely by Gypsy and that he was just following what his lover wanted him to do. The next day, the prosecutors showed jurors the text messages, sometimes pretty explicit, that Gypsy and Nick shared in the week before the unaliving. They often used various personas, as well as the knife was used in the unaliving. In the text messages that are shown, Gypsy is seen probing for more info about how this personality disorder of his works, seemingly trying to find out what brings his dark side out, constantly reminding Nick that he said nothing would get in their way of being together. She would also point out things like how their relationship issues were mostly due to the fact that they weren't physically together, and repeatedly suggesting that her mother is solely why. On the third day of Nick's trial, Gypsy speaks out. She told the jury that it was her idea so she could escape her mother's abuse. She mentioned how they slept together at the theater because she was hoping to get pregnant with his kid, and then Dee Dee would be forced to accept Nick. She also explained that Nick did not, in fact, rape her after the unaliving, that it was consensual. Finally, though, it was time for the jurors to deliberate, which took them a whole 2 hours. They found Nicholas Godejohn guilty of first-degree unaliving and armed criminal action. In February 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison, as well as 25 extra years for the armed criminal action. This has always amused me, when people get a life sentence and then extra years on top of that. I mean, you're already serving life in prison. What is the point of the extra ones?
Hey, just to be sure,
Nick's lawyers applied for an appeal, where in this hearing, they actually showed video of Gypsy emotionally manipulating Nick, as well as an instruction video from Gypsy on how to harm Dee Dee with a knife. Recently in 2023, public defender Tyler Coyle filed an appeal seeking a new trial for Nick. Time frame has not been set on for when the courts will hear that. Gypsy, however, she served 8 out of her 10 years and was released December of 2023 from prison. While in prison, though, she was engaged to a man named Ken Urker, who she met through a prison pen pal program. Their relationship eventually ended because in July of 2022, she married Ryan Anderson in a prison ceremony with no guests. When she was released from prison, she announced her ebook, which is titled Released Conversations on the Eve of Freedom. She moved in with her husband Ryan, began giving interviews to various news outlets and TV programs. Just a week after she was released from prison for second-degree unaliving, she was on Good Morning America, CNN, and The View, in which she discussed her release from prison and her plans moving on. Gypsy and her husband also filmed a docuseries about their lives shortly during and after her release from prison, which premiered on Lifetime. She is now freshly separated from Ryan Anderson with her former ex-fiance Ken Urker, and is now expecting their first child, which will be due in 2025. Nick Godejohn still speaks highly of Gypsy when he does in-jail interviews and wishes her nothing but the best. And this has been the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
My fucking God.
So let's talk about what we've actually been building the entire time that we have been talking about this. So I didn't want to build Gypsy Blanchard's house where the unaliving happened, so instead I decided to build a house that is actually of the most common style I found in Springfield, Missouri. So here you go. It's a very cute and adorable little house. You can actually get this. It is on my gallery on Sims 4. My gallery ID is IvyIsADino, or you can just look down below in the description. It'll be there. If you like what you saw here, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you guys so much for watching the very first episode of Build and Chilled.